And thanks everyone for joining this talk. So I haven't made this a long talk deliberately so you can ask lots of questions about the program. The thing about EDGE is if you start delving into what's actually delivered, you could probably tack on an extra hour. So rather than giving you a lot of detail, I'll give you an overview. And I've been involved in delivery with EDGE since the beginning, and that's a bit of an agenda of what I'll cover. So a bit of the history of EDGE, what makes it such a standout package, or the whole program, a number of packages making up the program. Can I just ask before I start, how many of you are familiar with EDGE? Yeah, so, no. How many of you have actually attended EDGE training? Yeah. So, okay, so some of you have attended training. Yep. Okay, and if you want to find out more about EDGE afterwards, I'm happy to have a chat about that. We used to have brochures in MLA, which are really handy, but we haven't got them at the moment. So, Working on it, great. You know, who is EDGE for? What's the target audience for EDGE? And what are the actual targeted outcomes? You know, what do we want people to walk away with when they actually attend EDGE training? And how can it be used by advisors and consultants? So even if you're not a deliverer of EDGE, how can you actually embrace EDGE? It's not just something someone else does. How can you actually use it to, you know, better service or work with your clients? So all these photos I've put up here, they're all photos from different workshops that I've run around Northern Australia. So I've done lots of training over in the Territory and also in Western Australia, and I actually did training down the Southern Rangelands in WA. And when we got to the module on minerals and I showed them the phosphorus map, they're completely off the map, poor buggers. So it's like they're in Siberia and nobody cares about where they live. So we need to actually, I said to Nigel, we need to actually update that map. So history of EDGE, what happened originally was MLA contacted producers across Queensland, the Northern Territory and Western Australia. It was about 2000, and asked them what sort of information, what was the key information they wanted to have in the disciplines of breeder management, nutrition, and grazing management. So those were the three packages that were first developed. That was put together. There were meetings to actually distill a lot of the information. So a lot of scientists came together and distilled the information, and that was packaged, and then there were pilots that were run. There were also accreditation days where for Nutrition Edge you actually had to come and present in front of a panel of people that actually scored you, and then they grilled you at the back of the room once you were finished delivering it to actually get accredited for Nutrition Edge. So it was hard to get a Guernsey, and there are a lot of people who are really qualified to act, you know, that had the technical knowledge, but you got to remember you're in the room with somebody for 3 days, so you also have to be able to develop good rapport and also be a good deliverer as well. It then got expanded with Business Edge and Grazing Fundamentals. It was primarily based in Northern Australia, so Queensland, New South Wales and the Northern Territory, and Business Edge has since been expanded down into the south. I believe it's the first properly commercially costed workshop package put out in Northern Australia by MLA. So, you know, it really required quite a big mind shift, both by people who delivered, which were primarily government staff. And I was with DPI at the time when we rolled this out in 2002, but it was also a pretty big paradigm shift for producers as well, because in Queensland in particular, so much different to New South Wales and Victoria, where it's mostly consultants, isn't it? And you do have some government staff in New South Wales, but it's very limited, whereas in Queensland and the Northern Territory, there's a lot of government staff that deliver training, and a lot of that training is, you know, fairly cheap. It doesn't cost people much. I mean, cheap, it's inexpensive. Doesn't cost much for people to come along, or they pay nix. So suddenly they're having to pay a considerable amount of money for the training. So it had to be developed such that people were guaranteed to actually get a return on investment. And not only did we have to have a high quality package then, but it also meant that, you know, deliverers had to actually lift their game as well. They couldn't just say, well, I don't know, if someone asks them a question, I'll find out for you. You might get away with that once or twice over the course of a few days, but you pretty much have to be able to answer questions several layers deep. You just have to, because you've raised the bar of expectations of what people want out of the workshop process. So that's just a bit of history behind that. So what makes Edge a premier package? That's just a cow digestive system getting cut up out in the paddock. It's high integrity of resource material. So there's no BS factor in the material that's put together. It's all scientifically validated. And it is consistent across packages. So, for example, recently the AE system has been updated, and that's going to be consistent across all packages. So everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet, and there's no conflicting information between packages. It's a combination of comprehensive delivery. So in the material that's actually supplied to people, so people receive some comprehensive workshop notes. That is a living document. So if there are changes, it's not like the old days where you printed out 1,000 copies and that's what you had to use until they were all gone. And we actually did that with Edge originally. We would get the number of copies we wanted from MLA, and then we would deliver that. We couldn't make changes. We give producers a feedback sheet to fill out, and I always say to producers, you know, it's not a tick and flick where MLA has a look and says, yep, you know, we've done a good job, and then they just throw it in the round file. That feedback is taken on board, and we've actually conducted 2 major reviews since the inception of Edge, and materials being upgraded, also based on feedback, but also on new research results that are coming out. So deliverers don't have the right to go and change the MLA slides. We need to stay consistent. So if I run something, or you run something, or you run something, we're going to be presenting the same material. But there will be, I'll talk a bit about the flexibility that's built in there. So they get comprehensive workshop notes, and that's a living document. They get a workbook and different resources depending on the package. So with Business Edge, they get a little memory stick that has a lot of templates in there that people can take home and use, so they can immediately apply what's learned. You've got accredited deliverers with a lot of experience, so that they can provide people with lots of case examples, draw on their experience to actually give people examples to back up concepts that they're delivering. So it's not just a slide fest and just showing slides and not actually having any substance to back that up. And that providing case examples is pretty important, particularly if you can provide them for that particular location, because that gives credibility to what you're delivering. It's core information for each of the areas, or core information on that particular discipline. So people aren't coming back and asking you the same questions over and over again. I don't know how many times I get the same person ringing up the same time of year each year with the same problem, and you give them the same advice. They just didn't have that fundamental understanding to actually think critically to figure some of those things out for themselves. So the benefit from this package is that, or all these packages, is that it provides people with fundamentals so that they can think critically and be able to identify if they have a problem. They mightn't necessarily be able to solve all problems, but they know what information to look for, who to go and speak to, further testing that they need to do, and so on. Flexibility to tailor for region. So for example, one of the things I do in Nutrition Edge is we still have a module on pasture quality and pasture quantity. Quality is always going to stay in there, but pasture quantity, that's seen as a bit of a GLM thing, grazing land management thing, but at the end of the day, if you haven't got grass, you're pretty much stuffed, aren't you? It doesn't matter what else you do. So that's an important thing. But obviously in different regions, you've got different land types, so we might insert slides that are specific to that region. So it's a bit of an add-on. It's not actually changing the core material. It's an add-on to actually enhance the quality of the workshop for the producers in that region to make it regionally relevant. People can walk away and immediately apply what they're learning. The nice thing about Edge is you do have some freedom of delivery in how you deliver things across to people. And one of the really important aspects I find is setting people up at those workshops, and it's actually to establish what is their why. Why are they there? What actually gets them up in the morning? What's their actual end goal? It might not even be to lift fertility or improve growth rate, because if that were the case, everybody would be doing all the right things, wouldn't they? People need something that motivates them. So we focus on what is their why, and start looking at the bigger picture rather than saying, well, we've got to fix up nutrition. Well, why do we? What are we actually trying to achieve? And getting people to write those things down so that they've got a context to apply that information. So as they're going through the training, they can actually think about, does this apply to the problem I'm trying to solve for my property, or what the goal that I'm actually trying to achieve for my property? So they're actually doing a bit of a sort on that information, because they do absolutely get overwhelmed for 3 days with information, and it's about picking out the bits that are most relevant at the time of the workshop. Okay, we used to run a follow-up day following on from Edge about 4 to 6 months later. We generally had about 30 to 50% of people returning to that, but most people just got busy, life got in the way, and they didn't see the value in it. And yet the people that came along actually found it was more valuable than attending the original workshop, because they had a chance to process information and formulate questions, and they're able to take things a lot further. So that's where I see people coming in, following on from the workshop, in finding a role in working with producers who attend training. So who is it Edge for? Originally, those guys are in a bit of a huddle there. They're actually doing some pasture measurements. Who is Edge for? Edge was developed for producers initially. That's the core target audience for Edge. So it's aimed at primary producers. But some of the other people that we get are get a lot of vets at workshops. Obviously, a lot of government advisors and extension officers, consultants, feed company staff, rural agencies, seed companies, agricultural college staff, students come along. I always love it when I get 15, 16-year-old students coming along. I think what a way to set yourself up, if that's the pathway you want to go down. Banks and financial institutions, so they get an understanding of all the decisions people have to make on their property. So it's quite a wide net, and sometimes you get quite a few of them all attending one workshop, which makes it a little bit trickier to manage, but it also adds value, because as Steve was saying, a lot of the benefit is in the networking with the people that are there at the workshops, and also during breaks. And they're also hearing things from other people's perspectives. So one of the benefits of Edge is that you find out what went wrong for other people, and you're not repeating their mistakes, or what went really well for them. So there's a lot of value in that as well. So it's pretty wide target audience. Some of the targeted outcomes, that's down in southwest Queensland, collecting dung samples with another producer group. Clear understanding of those fundamentals, so people aren't asking questions about what sort of supplement do I need to feed, or what do I need to vaccinate my animals with, for example. It's understanding those fundamentals, so when they do get advice, they're more likely to take it on, rather than thinking you just want me to spend my money. They understand why they're doing what they're doing. Ability to apply concepts in a specific discipline. So for this area that if I'm doing training in Nutrition Edge, these are some of the core concepts I need to understand, or, if it's in business edge or breeding, whatever it is, being able to apply those specific concepts. Commitment to taking action. I never let anyone leave my workshops without anyone committing to take some sort of action, and then they actually get their feedback sent to them so that they know, they're reminded of what they've committed themselves to. And that is another pathway that I think people working with producers, so if you have client groups or producer groups, that's where it's good to follow up and say, well, okay, what did you say you're going to commit to, or how can I help you progress things? Testing and gathering information to establish benchmarks rather than just shooting from the hip. Actually figuring out, well, where are we? Where do I need to prioritize my management? Is it in fertility? Is it in growth? Is it in reducing mortality? Where do I need to prioritize things? And I'm shooting from the hip if I don't actually establish benchmarks. So gathering some objective information and then actually prioritizing action. And that's where I see that, following on from an EDGE workshop where somebody can come in and assist people with actually prioritizing, where do I need to actually go initially, rather than pulling a whole lot of things on board at once and becoming overwhelmed. And it reminds me of, I do a lot of diet quality testing. I remember a producer, one particular station, they sent something like 19 dung samples to go and get analyzed all at once. And I wrote all the reports for them, and I just thought, where are they going to start? They got 19 paddocks that they've actually tested. How do they know what to set as their priority? So keeping it simple and actually achieving that goal and then moving on to something else. And then putting together a comprehensive management plan, and that's, one of the benefits of Breeding Edge, where they start off learning a bit of information and gradually building up a breeder management plan. And they're adding extra information in there just to tweak it as they're going along. So when they leave Breeding Edge workshop, they walk away with a breeder management plan. And if you're assisting them with that, well, they've already got a plan. It's a lot easier to help them rather than starting from scratch. And that's based more on what their priorities are rather than what they actually want to do. Because we all know there's jobs we don't really like doing, and we migrate to the ones that we like doing, and we try and rationalize why those are the things that we should be spending our time on. That's human nature, isn't it? No one else procrastinates in this room, do they? No, didn't think so. So how can EDGE be used by advisors or consultants? Firstly, to upskill themselves, making sure, because these packages are constantly being updated. It's a bit like coming to this training today. There's new stuff that we're learning all the time, and it's just nice, when you're working with people, to actually be all over the same material that they're learning as well. So learning what clients are learning, but also sending them to training and saying, I really think you need to go and do this training in this particular area, and actually upskilling them. And then you're able to have more objective conversations, and they're probably going to be a lot more receptive as well, and look at things from more of a technical point of view rather than an emotive point of view. Follow-up activities with clients following EDGE workshops. So it helps to, people come to a 3-day training and a lot of them walk away thinking, geez, there's more stuff I need to know now. So a lot of people come in, it's interesting because they might say, well, I need to know a little bit about this area or a bit about this area when they're talking about their nutritional issues or expectations. And by the end of it, they almost walk away with more questions than answers. And that's a good thing. Or following on from Nutrition Edge, I often recommend to people that they actually go and do a bit more training in grazing management, or do grazing fundamentals. That's pretty consistent to get a better understanding of their country, because a lot of them realize that there's a lot of plants that you're not even familiar with on their own country. Some really basic stuff, and that's not a criticism. That's right across the board. Identifying priorities for their property management, and what further testing, and that's something you can assist them with. Okay, let's have a look at what you learn, what testing you need to do. Have somebody in my coaching group is that they have to have baseline information, so they're not holding the group up, and everybody in that group has the same level of basic fundamental knowledge, so the group isn't getting bogged down in technical information, they can just keep moving along. And it's the same with PDS groups. You'll get more value if everybody's on the same page with their standard of knowledge, and even for non-funded formalized groups that you might be working with. And finally, you happy to hear that, Joe? If you do want more information, have a chat to an accredited deliverer. I don't know if you probably don't have names on the website, on the MLA website, but if you speak to somebody from MLA, they'll soon be able to let you know. So for those different packages, so those packages are Nutrition Edge, Breeding Edge, Grazing Land Management, Grazing Fundamentals, and Business Edge. Have a chat to the MLA Edge Network Manager, and they'll be able to give you a lot of comprehensive information, and Liz informs me that the brochures will be coming out, new ones? Sometime? Yeah. Or speak to past participants and just, ask them what they thought of those workshops as well.